If I could just ask everyone to take their seats, please, that would be great. Well, welcome to sunny Parramatta. What a great day. Parramatta's turned on for us this morning. Thank you all for getting up so early to join us for breakfast and to mark this really fantastic occasion for the Parramatta Light Rail team. My name's Kirsten Woodland and I'll be your MC today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that today's briefing is being held on the country of the Darug people, the traditional owners of this land, and we pay our respect to the Darug people's elders, both past and present, and we welcome any Aboriginal people here today. Well, as I said, today is an exciting milestone for the Parramatta Light Rail project, and we're really pleased that you could all get up so early to join us here this morning. The Parramatta Light Rail is a real game changer for the whole of Sydney, and we're really pleased to welcome all of our industry partners because it's with you that we can get the project delivered. Can I just ask you all to please switch your phones to silent, and in case of emergency today, we'll wait in the room and follow the procedures of the hotel staff. So today we're very pleased to welcome the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure, the Honourable Andrew Constance, and the Secretary for Transport for New South Wales, Tim Reardon. We'll be hearing from both of them shortly. This morning we'll also be hearing from Stephen Troughton, Deputy Secretary of Infrastructure and Services for Transport for New South Wales, Marg Prendergast, the Sydney Coordinator General for Transport for New South Wales, and Tim Poole, who is the Parramatta Light Rail Program Director. Well, firstly, I'd like you all to join me in welcoming the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure, Andrew Constance, to the stage.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming. What an incredible turnout. In doing so, can I particularly acknowledge country and pay my respects to elders both past and present. And also, it's tremendous to be here this morning with my parliamentary colleague, Jeff Lee, who I will invite up to just say a couple of words from the Parramatta MP's perspective in what this project actually means. It's also great to be joined by Tim Reardon, the Secretary of Transport for New South Wales, a number of his executive team, but also in particular Tim Poole, who is the Project Director. Tim Reardon and I have a couple of things on, just a small amount of infrastructure that we're building across the state at the moment. In fact, if you reflect on it, we've got, in essence, 4 metro projects, 3 light rail projects, major motorway projects like WestConnex, NorthConnex, and it's in total about $41.5 billion that we're spending over the next 4 years. That's of a $73 billion program. At the moment, we're spending around $1 billion a month, just to put it in perspective. We've never ever been at this level. And the only way that we can deliver this program successfully is, in essence, courtesy of the strong relationship that we have with our contractors, with our private sector partners, to be able to deliver this incredible program. Parramatta Light Rail is one which is of enormous importance to our government, Western Sydney Light Rail. It's a project which, in essence, is going to connect precincts across the heart of Western Sydney. Precincts such as Westmead, North Parramatta, the heart of Parramatta CBD itself, through to Camellia and Carlingford. It'll pass through a number of very important projects which we're building at this time, such as the stadium. We're also, of course, going to be investing in the Powerhouse Museum. We've got an enormous program here in Parramatta, and of course at its heart is connectivity. The way in which we're going to deliver this project is not too dissimilar to the Metro project. We are looking to issue a number of packages of work, 4 packages of work, in order to complete this project, and of course the team will run through the specifics of that throughout the course of today's industry briefing. I expect this project, of course, to be value for money on behalf of the people of New South Wales in terms of those valuable taxpayer dollars that we're investing into this fully funded and financed project. This hasn't happened by accident. The government has the ability to finance this project. We've been able to do so through initiatives such as our Recycling Capital initiative. You've all heard people like me talking about the poles and wires transaction and the ports transaction and the desalination plant transaction. In essence, we're recycling capital from our assets to invest in new productive infrastructure, in particular transport and roads infrastructure, to drive our state economy to continue to be the #1 state that we are. So thank you for your interest. I know that certainly in terms of this program, this is stage 1. I also want to make it crystal clear that we are building stage 2, and we'll be looking to do that once we've finalised the homework which exists between our other announcement, which is of course the metro train between Sydney and Parramatta, which will have stops at places such as the Bays Precinct and Sydney Olympic Park. And the best way to ensure that the interface with the second stage of light rail is done in a way where we don't, in essence, build a piece of infrastructure which won't reach its full potential. This project is going to service an incredible number of people. By 2036, 180,000 people will be living within a 10-minute walk of the light rail project. The development uplift associated with it will be incredible. So we're very excited about what this means for this state, not only just here in Parramatta in the heart of Sydney and Western Sydney, but for everybody across New South Wales. I'm just going to invite Jeff Lee up to say a few words as the local MP. The reason I'm doing that is that he is an important stakeholder in this process. One thing that we have observed with many of our infrastructure projects is that local members are all too often the interface with the local community and project teams, and I feel it only important that obviously he is introduced to all of you today. I also am very pleased, and I forgot to mention Mark Prendergast, who's here, who in essence coordinates the city around our infrastructure programs and is responsible for managing the city during what is an incredibly disruptive period as we get on with such major construction across the place. And she too will have a team of people working with contractors and the local community to make sure that we mitigate as best as possible the effects of light rail construction. So on that note, Jeff, I'll invite you up to say a few words, and thank you all again for being here this morning.
Thank you, Minister, and can I just welcome everybody to Parramatta once again, and thank you for your interest in the Parramatta Light Rail project. And can I say, as a local member, and obviously I have a very keen interest in this project amongst other projects. Thank you, Minister for Infrastructure, Andrew Constance. Can I say that Parramatta Light Rail will not just be a light rail transport project. In fact, Parramatta Light Rail will be the project that transforms Parramatta and Greater Parramatta surrounds. It'll make the transformation the catalyst for the future development of Central City. It is one of those projects which everybody is welcoming. Yes, we will have a few challenges along the way, and we acknowledge those challenges, but one thing I know about Parramatta people is they're resilient. So we in Parramatta look forward to this project. We look for your bids and your consortiums and your tenders and all those sorts of things to actually deliver the project on time. It's a great community to work for, and it's a great project. Can I just say that I was away last week with the Premier overseas on a mission, and there was only 2 projects that everybody seemed to mention, and everyone had interest from overseas investors and people wanting to bid, and one was the Parramatta Light Rail. So it has international reputation about a wonderful project. We in Parramatta look forward to your participation to get, as the Minister said, to get best value for money. I look forward to seeing you guys around and enjoying the rest of the morning. Thank you very much. I'm Jeff Lee, MP.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to the Minister as well. We've got a short presentation, a video presentation for you now, so you can sit and relax for a minute and enjoy the presentation.
Western Sydney's latest major infrastructure project is one step closer. with the Parramatta Light Rail Environmental Impact Statement to go on public exhibition so the community can have its say. Stage 1 will connect Westmead to Carlingford via Parramatta CBD over a 12-kilometre route. It will link Parramatta's booming CBD with new communities, local jobs, schools, hospitals and the region's growing recreation and entertainment precincts. Major attractions along the route include the new Western Sydney Stadium, university campuses, the redeveloped Arthur Phillip High School and Parramatta Public School, the Powerhouse Museum and Rosehill Racecourse. The New South Wales Government has been engaging with key stakeholders and the community to maximise the benefits of Parramatta Light Rail. Light Rail will create a pedestrian-friendly boulevard along the front of the Westmead Health, Education and Research Precinct, with connections to Parramatta Park, CBD and Parramatta North. It will provide access for the urban renewal of the Parramatta North Heritage Precinct and innovative spaces in Church and Macquarie Streets. A light rail stop at the edge of Parramatta Square will be part of the city's vibrant new civic centre, with pedestrian links to Parramatta Station and the river. Light rail will also link communities between Carlingford and Camellia, including the New South Wales Government's focus on the Talopia Priority Precinct, with a two-way track featuring regular services. The Environmental Impact Statement for Parramatta Light Rail Stage 1 will be displayed by the Department of Planning and Environment. This document includes details on the route, key benefits, urban design, and the impacts of construction and operation. For more information, head to our websites.
Well, as the Minister said, it certainly is an exciting time, not just for Sydney, but also for us at Transport for New South Wales. And leading the charge is our Secretary for Transport, Mr. Tim Reardon, who I'll now introduce you to and welcome him to the stage. Thank you, Tim.
Well, thank you for that, and welcome one and all to this Parramatta Light Rail industry briefing. I often say when we have these sessions that they're here for you to get the best out of, and I hope today is no different than the other ones we've run. With the attendance we have, it just tells you the unprecedented levels of interest in our project, and long may it projects, and long may that continue. It's fantastic. So thanks for doing an early morning. Tim Poole, the Program Director of Parramatta Light Rail, has now set a bit of a theme. You might recall that the last time we had one of these at Rosehill Racecourse, I think it was even earlier, so he's given you a bit of a reprieve this morning in terms of having to sleep in to get here. But so welcome one and all. Could I also acknowledge the Darug people, the traditional owners of the land, pay my respects to elders past and present. Can I thank the Minister and the local member for giving their comments and opening this session as they always do. I'll again remark the fact that the Minister is at each and every one of these industry briefings, and myself at these industry briefings, tells you what the priorities are for ourselves. Yes, he and I are very busy, but we wouldn't be anywhere else but be here in front of you and talking about these projects. It's the centrepiece of what we have on at the moment, and I'll talk a little bit about the pipeline of infrastructure in a little more detail, because it's something that I know that you all want more and more information about where we're up to, not just on Parramatta Light Rail, but our broader context. I'll also talk a little bit about future transport strategy, because it'll bring to life Parramatta itself, Greater Parramatta and Olympic Park precinct, the so-called GPOP, how that works with the Greater Sydney Commission, and where we're going to next with a whole range of that broader planning over the next 6 to 9 months. But if I could, I'll just reiterate what the Minister said and give a little bit of context about the budget. Yes, it's $72.7 billion over a 4-year forward estimates period. 41.4 of that is for the transport cluster that I have the privilege and honour of leading. There was a lot of talk in this 17-18 budget about education and health as well. There's significant uplifts in infrastructure spend in both of those areas, and in normal times, unprecedented levels actually in those two areas. It just so happens that we are at another level altogether. We are delivering at about $1 billion a month. We coined that within ourselves and to how we talk to our people in our agencies. So 25,000 people that do work in the transport cluster are very aware of what our priorities are and the speed, urgency with which we need to get on with our work, and the expectations are there for all of us to understand, to make that clear and coherent for everyone, and to make that clear and coherent for you, that that's sort of our level of expectation upon ourselves, and therefore collectively, and how we partner with you, how we're going to deliver, you know, that level of expenditure. So it is unprecedented, and it is large scale, and it is across a whole range of portfolios. I'll just turn now to a slide that will be of quite a deal of interest to people. It's not so you can look at every single project that's going on in the great nation of Australia, but it's for us and to give you some level of understanding and confidence that I have many conversations with many people in this room about the infrastructure pipelines, about how we're tracking, what we're looking at, how we're collaborating with other jurisdictions, and do we have a single controlling eye on the infrastructure pipeline. I dare say that we are putting a lot of effort into that. Myself and the Chief Executive of Infrastructure New South Wales, Jim Betts, who is a colleague and a very good friend, we spend a lot of time thinking about what our pipeline does look like. And I mean the East Coast pipeline, if not the Australian pipeline. Not every project in the world is on there, but it gives you some feel of where we've been during the mining boom, and a little bit of a dip then, and then what is coming and is basically in this jurisdiction basically upon us right now. Whether all the projects come to market, how they come to market is not the point. It just gives you some feel of the pipeline that will be with us through the last few years of this decade and well into the next decade. So if you're looking for confidence and you look at the blue line, particularly on the right-hand side, we will be working very hard for some considerable period in this jurisdiction, but we're not the only ones, and it's only clear and reasonable that we actually give you a feel of how we're collaborating with other jurisdictions, particularly at the moment with Victoria, whom many of you would be in discussion with as well across a whole range of projects. It'd be fair to say that Infrastructure New South Wales, Infrastructure Victoria, the Secretary in this jurisdiction, that means me, the Secretary in Victoria and in Queensland, we do collaborate, we do communicate as much as we possibly can. How we bring things to market is sometimes outside our pay grade. It's a political call when certain things come to market, but that gives you a feel of the scale of activity that we see coming, and that is what we are readying ourselves for. It is astronomical. It is once in a generation. It's very exciting, but to give you a feel about the skills, the capability and capacity requirements that we all have upon us, which I won't dwell on too much except to say that we're well aware, acutely aware of what that does mean for our capacity to deliver, and it's one of the things that we want to give you as much detail on each of these projects as we go through, and today is no different. Parramatta Light Rail will be here to give you as much detail and certainty about how they'll bring their packages to market, how they've listened to what you have to say about how we should think about bringing things to market in the interactive testing, market testing we've done over the last several months, if not year, and give you the certainty of how you'll bid on various packages. If I just turn to what we do have on, just a reminder, yes, we do have a whole range of projects on right at the moment in delivery. So City Metro Northwest, City and Southwest are in delivery, and we're planning for City Metro West. We do have a More Trans, More Services new timetable, or series of timetables for that matter, over the next few years. The next one will be towards the end of this year. Train timetables are massive undertakings, and we've put a lot of work into that, and there's probably a lot of people in this room we can thank for assisting with that, whether it's the purchase of new trains, whether it's a lot of enabling works across the network, and there are 10 fairly significant projects either underway or in planning right at the moment to enable and facilitate a new timetable. They are major projects. They don't get much airtime, but when you are uplifting for customers, which is what we're about, customer at the centre of everything we do, when you're uplifting services at the rate we are, you do have to put a lot of effort into those type of projects. So to Steve Troughton, Deputy Secretary of Infrastructure and Services, and his team, I thank them for the amount of effort they've put in, because if you watch the press over the last year or two, train use in this city has gone up quite considerably. It's sort of like a 20% increase in our use. The railway, as you know, is probably over 160 years old now. To get a 20% uplift just in a few short years is quite a dramatic demand to have to respond to with the capacity that we need. So well done to them. We have new ferries, the B line's coming up for opening soon, but just in 2017 alone, it's one of those years when we're starting to see the fruits of a lot of hard work from you all. So the Baringaroo ferry hubs are now open. The inner harbour ferries are now starting to roll out. We have Beeline, which will actually open later on this year, and there was an announcement about the new buses in the recent past. First light rail vehicle has arrived for CBD and South East Light Rail, and there's a significant amount of track laid on that project now, which I'm sure you've all looked at for your own due diligence. WestConnect Stage 1A has opened in the last couple of months and is now in effective use, and the Newcastle integrated franchise for bus, ferry and in the future light rail will come along soon, and the actual hard work on that project and civils will happen in earnest starting next month. So there is a lot on, but there are a lot of projects that are now coming into operation, and that's exciting for us to maintain the momentum, to ensure that the community understands the impacts of what we're doing and what Marg Prendergast is doing. I applaud the work that she continues to do across the Sydney Basin to actually ensure that the community comes along with us with patience is an incredibly important thing. Parramatta Light Rail will be no different in that regard. It is about us ensuring that the customers are continued to be placed at the heart and centre of everything we do, that the community understands where we're up to with the project every step of the way. Stakeholder consultation, project management, all much more integrated than probably ever before if you're looking for expectation settings out of myself and the executive team in the transport cluster. We continue to learn lessons as we go. We try to do things better for each project that comes along, and Parramatta Light Rail should bear the fruit of a lot of the lessons we've had over the last few years and take it to another level. We have a team that is very, very focused on ensuring we do that, and we want to partner with people with the same mindset. So I can't overemphasise that enough. The amount of projects we have in the Sydney Basin, but indeed across the state, means that the community sees some light at the end of the tunnel, excuse the pun, but they also want to ensure that as we work through that incredible infrastructure pipeline, that you don't just take a civil engineering or an electrical engineering approach to it. You understand that you are part of a community, you are working in delivering growth assets for transport to respond to this city going from 5 million people to 8 million people over the next 40 years, and you are part of that story. It's not just about a bit of physical hard infrastructure, it's about being part of that community for the several years that we're there with them. I'll just turn now to quickly to the concept of the Greater Sydney Commission and the work we're doing with them on future transport. You may have seen, if you haven't, it's probably worth you having a look at the fact that the Greater Sydney Commission has repurposed Sydney's thinking in terms of long-term planning to 3 cities: an eastern city, which is the traditional Sydney CBD, the Macquarie Arc, etc. Parramatta as the central city, which it always has been, but we're now starting to really acknowledge that, and a Western Sydney based around the great opportunity is the Western Sydney Airport as it comes to life. Those 3 cities, but certainly the central one, you think about the importance of Greater Parramatta and Olympic Park corridor, then you bring that in and think about Parramatta Light Rail. It will be an unbelievably strong catalyst for change in that Greater Parramatta area and that central city. So to say you're working on an iconic project that will be a catalyst for growth would be an understatement. If you think of CBD South East Light Rail and the amount of approvals and the amount of construction that's now underway, not just on light rail, but the amount of development that will go along George Street in the CBD, the eastern city, the same thing will happen here very quickly, and the discussion will be very quick. So again, you are part of a community that is a catalyst for how people will live and work around that central city, and you will be the glue that binds it with the Parramatta Light Rail project. So incredibly important that you have that strategic context. The concept of 30 minutes is, we would all love to be across this city in 30 minutes. It's not the point. The point is about living, working, studying and visiting areas where you have economic opportunity for yourself with a job, and where you might reside can actually be achieved with an aspiration of 30 minutes is what it's about. Hence the Greater Sydney Commission have coined it in that way. Just narrowing that down a bit, we're working very, very hard with the Greater Sydney Commission in terms of our future transport strategy. Both the plan for growing Sydney out of the GSC, the future transport strategy out of ourselves, and indeed the Infrastructure New South Wales update to their state infrastructure strategy are all in the pipeline right at the moment, and will all come about, as I said, in probably the next 6 to 9 months. They'll be incredibly important planning documents. As much as you may or may not like planning documents, I'd suggest you follow what we're doing. Go onto our website and actually see where we're up to. We've been out consulting sort of for the last 6 to 9 months already, and the amount of interaction we're having with the community across the state, but indeed in Sydney, is unprecedented. The way people are interacting with us on digital media platforms, social media is like nothing we've ever seen before. So people are genuinely interested in the projects and wanting to engage. So within that, the Greater Parramatta to Olympic Peninsula is the centrepiece, as I said, for the central city, and Parramatta Light Rail, certainly stage 1, which we're here to talk about today, but also stage 2 is something that we're happy to take questions on as well, are unbelievably important in bringing together the concept, as I said, of a 30-minute city, and how this area of the world will interact, how people will move around. As the Minister said, there's well over 100,000 people, 180,000 people, I think, who will actually be a beneficiary of Parramatta Light Rail in the 2030s. And that is quite an incredible thing when you think about it, about the demand yield. But what we're here today to talk about is about delivery packages, procurement, and there's a few people to go into a fair bit of detail. I'm going to hang around to ensure that we can answer as many questions as you can, because, as I said, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but here, and to talk about these great projects that we do have on. So I'll be here for the rest of the session. I'm happy to sit and participate and take any questions that we may have. But for someone like me to actually be in charge at this point in time, to work with a minister who has been with us now in his 3rd year, if you listen to him, for the amount of detail he's across about this portfolio is a credit to him. And I mean that genuinely, because over a long period of time I've seen a lot of ministers come and go. Under my watch, I've been lucky enough to have continuity when I was a Deputy Secretary, with the now Premier, to have continuity of 2 ministers running this transport portfolio, and that stability probably gives you some feel of why we're getting along with things at such a fast pace in this jurisdiction. I'll leave it there, except to say I'm very proud to see that the Parramatta Stadium had the blue and gold bunting around it. We're in the finals as a very, very hardcore Eels supporter over a long period of time. We're in the finals this year, so I couldn't be more delighted to be at Parramatta for a whole range of reasons. So good luck with the rest of the deliberations. Make sure you ask lots of questions. We expect stunned silence, so why don't you surprise us and do something different today? So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Cheers.
Thank you, Tim. Well, with $1 billion a month worth of projects to deliver, and of course the Parramatta Light Rail project in particular, it's a really important time for us to be talking to you, our industry partners. And on that note, I'll invite the Deputy Secretary for Infrastructure and Services, Steve Troughton, to the stage to do just that.
Yeah, good morning all. So I'm a pretty good big Broncos fan, so we've been stuffed by the Eels twice in about the last month, so you can imagine the stick I've been getting at work from my boss. On to more important things. Tim mentioned about the whole pipeline of works that we've got coming up. Next Wednesday, Infrastructure and Services have got our annual sort of pipeline day where we sort of roll out the whole of our programme. We've got about 10 billion capital-wise of that budget spend over the next 4 years, as well as all of the services stuff that we do, which is probably about 10 billion per annum when you include the trains. And so that pipeline presentation next Wednesday will also include a bit more detail about future transport, which will allow you all to get a bit of a feel for what the next sort of 30, 40 years brings for Greater Sydney. It'll also help understand a bit more what Sydney Trains and Trainlink do, because they'll be presenting to their pipeline. So that'll look very much at the next 10 years. It'll give you a feel for what's coming up. These are important days for us in INS. One of my desires is that we engage with stakeholders better, we build better relationships with industry, and we understand each other more. So please come along to that. Please also make sure you have questions, and we've got half an hour set aside for questions today, so don't be shy. This is your day, as Tim said, and it's important that you get a real feel for what we're looking for at the end of this presentation. Moving on to the light rail project, so that, as the Minister said, Parramatta is booming, and there's a significant amount of work that's going to happen here, and it's really going to start to shape this great city, and it's really going to take it forward to the next century. And the light rail is going to be fundamental to that. But I mean, if you think about the projects going on, we've got health. It's going to be one of the largest tertiary hospital precincts in the Southern Hemisphere. With urban growth, large tracts of land that they're going to start to develop. We've got the stadium, as we mentioned. The City Council have a large number of projects, as well as RMS, land and housing, and other people. So there's going to be a lot happening here. It's going to be a busy place. This is our third light rail project that we've got going at the moment, obviously with the CBD and also Newcastle. And you know, we're looking really to do it slightly different. And the reason for that is that we've had significant industry engagement from the team. We've done a great job for us over the last sort of year. And we've also learned some lessons from other projects and also what's going on around the world. But I think most importantly, we've been listening to what you've been saying to us, and that's why we've come up with a bit of a different delivery model following those conversations with you. And that'll be talked about a bit detail later, but it certainly is outlined in the packs you've got there. We're hoping to have a bit of a risk allocation and a structure that allows innovation and collaboration. Certainly, we need to make sure we work really well with all stakeholders, particularly utilities. That's a really fundamental part to this. And so that's what's going to make this project a success. So having relationships, working with the community, getting great outcomes. For relationship models, you know, we need people with experience in that type of model. You know, we really don't want to see you bringing your hardcore D&C gorillas along, because that's not going to help what we're trying to achieve. We also would like to see local content. You know, we see that in Newcastle at the moment, where we've got local people working on that project, local contractors working on that project, and they're all really working hard for Newcastle because they want to make that a success for Newcastle. And it brings a really good culture to a project, and it brings you know, a real sort of desire to make things right. And I think also local content here is really, really important, because Parramatta is different from the Eastern City. It's got its own culture, its own style, and people there and contractors here will understand that and be able to do things in a better way. Of course, we're looking for light rail experience, and you know, we're structuring this project up really to be more hands-off as an agency. And historically, we've probably been giving you quite strict designs on what we want, but we're really trying to fast-track this a little bit to get better outcomes, to let you innovate, to let you bring the skills that you've learned from overseas and also in Australia to the project, so that we get a better outcome. So innovation, collaboration is a key part of what we want to achieve. So really, finally, a team that's part of Parramatta and wants the best of Parramatta, that's allowed to innovate, collaborate, wants to have relationships and build strong businesses here, is what we're trying to look for. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. On a project this size, of course, government and industry need to work together. There'll be lots of problem solving, finding solutions, and addressing those critical issues. As Tim said, we need to keep the customer at the centre of everything we do. We need to be agile and flexible and make sure that that customer is our focus. The perfect person to speak about that, of course, is Marg Prendergast, who is now going to come to the stage. And Marg is the Sydney Coordinator General and has been working on the CBD project. So Marg, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and it's great to start off another light rail project. I'm come fresh from Sydney Light Rail and the School of Hard Knocks, but what we have learned is how complex a light rail project is. And we know that there's going to be such phenomenal disruption while we build, and even while we plan it to some degree in interactions, but we know the result will be fantastic. And I suppose where we're going to support Tim's team is actually on managing those impacts as we move through this project. And we look forward to working with everyone involved. And I'll talk a little bit more about collaboration, because collaboration is actually the heart of how we make this work. No, that didn't do it. Nope. I might just get some help just to do the slides. Yep, great. Awesome. So we're the coordination office. We actually got formed after the contracts and everything were let for the Sydney Light Rail project. And effectively, it was in a recognition of how big and how complex the project was. So basically what we do is provide a holistic transport view across the projects. It applies when there's lots of traffic and transport projects. It applies when there's lots of other projects happening in the precinct and urban development. And really our role is to manage the cumulative or the incidental impacts. What we find is that every project thinks only about themselves. Okay, it's about my project, my milestones, my delivery, but you actually have to take a helicopter view and look across all the projects that are interacting in any given geographic area. We try to really communicate all of the traffic and transport changes that happen along the way, and we use Tomorrow's Sydney as a banner. The Tomorrow's Sydney campaign is not actually a tool to promote the projects per se, it's actually to guide the community. It's to set key messages, such as our travel demand management messages, but it's also to use all the collateral to guide through every single change. This year alone, together with our contractors on Sydney Light Rail, we've actually implemented over 100 traffic changes. Every weekend we come in and close 3, 4, 5 intersections. The amount of work that goes in the lead up to every single change is phenomenal, and the communication you need to guide everyone through it, it has to be really sharp. People have to know what the changes are, or you won't keep the area moving. We also try to support businesses and community, but we acknowledge that this is a really difficult project. Sometimes I get really jealous of Metro. That is the incredibly complex engineering project, a game changer, but they just pop up in a suburb and they don't actually sit in front of people's houses, in front of people's businesses. And so that people are with them every day, listening to the noise and the dust. That's what we have, and that's why the early planning and the early engagement, both together with the project and industry and with the community and businesses affected, is going to be crucial. I just want to say it is all about collaboration. It's about, we're here to support Tim Poole's team, but we're really here to work with all of the projects that are happening in the area. Industry, contractors, anyone who will work on this project, council, police, emergency services, the utilities authorities, and most importantly, the people who are affected by the project. We're here to support this project, and my team will offer specific services that I'll talk about to support it, but it is complex. I found myself at a Parramatta Light Rail meeting last week discussing electromagnetic interference with a woman from University of Western Sydney. 3 years ago, I didn't even know what that was. I'm a traffic and transport person. The amount of complexity and things that you will have to deal with on a project of this scale is incredible. What we do specifically is we do disruption comms, so we'll guide the community through all of the different changes. We do the operational planning, so we will work with the contractor and the project to do all the traffic management and the contingency planning. And contingency planning is crucial because it is about keeping Parramatta and the broader area moving. The Transport Management Centre also reports to me, so we have full span of control over all the road occupancy licensing, and we also have a very special interest in making sure special events continue. We also, whilst we don't do the strategic land use planning, that really is done by our freight and strategy planning area in transport, and Tim is actually taking a lead role about urban growth right across the greater precinct here. What we come in and do is sign off every single DA so that we can have a conversation with every single person doing any development work in this entire area, and from Westmead ultimately to Olympic Park, so that we can manage those cumulative impacts and get the engagement really early. The other thing that we need to think of is freight planning. Freight is crucial to keeping businesses, the hospitals, etc. going. And whilst we build and close roads and change traffic, we actually have to keep the deliveries and the services coming in and out of every business. So local access becomes crucial, but also working with transport operators to get them to innovate and change, because you can't do something of this scale without actually driving innovation and change. And to be quite honest, I'll talk about it in a moment, we use the disruption of a project like this as an opportunity, because it's an opportunity to actually drive transport changes that we've always really wanted. The other thing you'll find is the minute you close a road or change something, you will poke the bear and problems will come up that you never knew about. Illegal coach parking, taxis wanting to access a particular area, and you actually need to be agile and deal with each and every problem, because every bit of every operator, everyone involved in transport is quite crucial, so we have to look at it holistically and help them all through this change. So for us, it's also about business and community support. I can't say enough about how important that is, and I think my key message to you today is you need to think about the impacts on businesses and residents as we actually plan the project. You need to think about it really early. You need to think, is there a different way I can build? Is there a way where, maybe you don't build around 12 to 2 and 6 and 8 at night in a restaurant precinct? Do you really want to put that portaloo in front of the resident's house or a business serving coffee? It's those little things that actually become big things, and you have to think about those little things up front. Yeah. I just want to talk about Parramatta. Stephen alluded to it with how much activity is actually occurring here. It is quite similar in a way to the precinct where we're building Sydney Light Rail through. We've got a huge hospital that's growing. We've got a major university. We've got a sporting precinct. We've got a CBD. We've got a village feel with residents in Devonshire Street. We've got high-rise residents in the CBD. And this is going to be the same between Westmead, UWS, the powerhouse development, the stadium development, and all of the cranes that you see on the horizon. So when light rail is ultimately built through this CBD and through this whole area, you're going to be building right alongside a whole bunch of developers. And what I can tell you from the CBD is we now have $16 billion worth of development in the pipeline, private development in the CBD. $4 billion of it is along the light rail line. So what's happening is we're getting major building redevelopments, and we're getting shop fronts turning over, and we're getting all the flagship stores moving into George Street. But what it means is you're building while someone else is trying to build right on your doorstep. And the collaboration and the integration that's required to manage the construction traffic and so that you can both get on with the job becomes really, really crucial. Look, our key learnings, I'm going to be really quick, is prepare for disruption. The beauty of this is that we've got to engage really early with Tim's team, and we know so much more than we did 2 years ago because we've been living it. And so we know that people will adapt to changes if they know in advance and if you guide them through it. We also know that things like capacity improvements, so we work really closely as partners with the Roads and Maritime Services, and the way that we actually carve up the duties, which is important to know, is RMS will focus very much on the network and end state, and we look after the construction management phase of it. So we will guide through all the traffic management, all the changes through in construction, whilst RMS will talk about and work on what is the end state of the network. But getting those capacity improvements in early so that it makes it easier for you to close roads becomes absolutely crucial to keep this area moving. We also have to reconfigure the public transport network. And what we've learnt is you do it once if you can. You don't want to have a death by 1,000 cuts. You want to come in, move all the buses around in one hit. There will be bus stop changes and things down the road, little things, but if you've got a major change, you do it at once. We're also building at a time where public transport's growing, and we're having to provide more and more services, be it growth bus services. We're now moving into on-demand transport. We've got taxis and Ubers to accommodate. We've got a growing tourist market, more hotels coming into Parramatta. We have to service all of those parties to keep it moving. So the bypass routes is the other crucial thing. What we want to do is set up a network so that we can promote to people the best way to get around Parramatta if they don't have to drive straight in. Because at the end of the day, you want to try to reduce traffic as much as we can while we build. And the last but not least, the chestnut that we deal with every single day is curbside management. You're going to have to move loading zones, you're going to have to change parking, and it becomes really complex, and you actually have to really work with people who are impacted. You'll then have a childcare centre right in the centre of your CBD where they think, that they can come and drop off and have 15-minute parking at the same time you're trying to get all your buses through. That's the sort of thing you need to balance. This is a look at some of the capacity improvements we did in the CBD. RMS did an amazing job, and this was a huge project. 800,000 hours of design and construct. 5 times the Harbour Bridge of resurfacing. We moved all the bus lanes into the centre because what we need for Parramatta CBD is a more livable city, and we actually need to prioritise public transport, pedestrians and cyclists. That's what a livable city's about, and we need to look at what we can do with traffic and to try to minimise it as much as possible. Yep. Sorry. This is what we did with the buses. So we moved the buses in the Sydney CBD. We moved 330 buses out of the core CBD area in the peak 1 hour. Now that's made a huge difference, but it took a lot of work. And we'll be doing similar things here at Parramatta. And this also brought us better reliability as the buses come in, touch on the edge and drive back out. We also then worked out our capacity improvements so that we actually invested on the edge of the city so we could tell people to drive around the city. And that becomes really crucial for us as we had to close George Street. Yeah. Okay, I just want to touch on our mission is to keep the area moving while all this happens, and we will work with you to actually enable the work to happen. It's about managing the changes and communicating the changes. It's the intersection work on weekends. It's when you execute and you make George Street one street up two-way. We've just made Elizabeth Street in the city two-way. And it wasn't just a traffic switch for us. We actually had to go out and do a really broad-scale pedestrian safety campaign because you had people who were used to looking one way to cross a main road and suddenly you have to look two-way. So you have to anticipate every aspect and make sure you communicate well. So for us, this just details what we do. My team will help through all aspects of the construction staging. Our mission is to help you get on with the work because that's what Tim expects of us. Tim wants us to help you get the work done, and that's what our team will do. Sometimes we're balancing difficult things. Sometimes we'll say, no, special event that weekend, you can't be at X, but we will work with you to actually do that. And we actually put a whole lot of resourcing in the field. We think that our success has been all of the proactive monitoring, resources embedded in TMC, extra police, and commanders on the ground. Freight and servicing, just going to touch on that. That is so crucial to a functioning city. It's about making sure that our deliverers know what's happening when we move loading zones, and it's about trying to innovate. In the CBD in Sydney, we're actually trialling a courier hub where people come, drop and dispatch with bicycles and on foot, because we're actually trying to change our parameters. We're working with the big end of town to say, do you really need to bring 20 trucks in a day? Can't you consolidate it somewhere like Alexandria and bring less trucks? I suppose what I'm really trying to impress is that when you come in and start closing roads and doing major construction, you actually have to drive innovation. You have to get other people to change and do things differently. Yeah. And it's also just, you've got to support business. Yeah. The biggest thing we've done is a recognition that whilst we have got such phenomenal investment here in New South Wales in terms of public transport and road infrastructure, we actually have to sweat the assets we've got. To accommodate growth, we have to manage demand as well as providing new supply. And so we've implemented what we call the Travel Demand Project. It's called Travel Choices, and we've worked with over 660 businesses. And what we're trying to do is use the disruption to get them to change their behaviour. And the biggest things we actually want them to do is retime. So actually travel earlier, travel later, use all our public transport capacity, use our road capacity, because at the moment, everyone descends on the CBDs in peak 1 hour. So we have to spread that, and we have to actually work with flexible work programs, health and wellbeing programs to get more active transport and just to spread the load, because that's the only way we're going to accommodate growth. We are using projects like these to do this, and we'll be doing this in Parramatta. We've actually had great success in the CBD. We've had a significant reduction in the vehicles inbound in the morning peak. And so whilst across the whole day the reduction is less, the morning peak is highly significant. It's sitting at about 9–10%, okay? And that's sustained over 2 years. And that's what we need to do for a modern city, and that's what Parramatta is going to become. So this becomes really important for that. And we're being welcomed by businesses who actually do want to make the change for them to help them keep their workforce who want flexibility. And last but not least, it's about trying to maintain a vibrant city during transformation. Sometimes we know it's a construction zone through the city, and sometimes it feels like you're trying to put lipstick on a pig. But at the end of the day, we have to keep the footfall coming, and we have to think about the businesses and the residents who are along this route. And you have to think about that when you think about how you do construction staging, about how you interact with them. They're not a transaction. The old day of consulting was a tick and flick. Yeah, I've spoken to X house on that street. They are real people, and they are really impacted by this project, so the engagement has to be real, and it has to be two-way. It's not a tick and flick exercise, and it's really hard when you get the volumes across a large route. But we'll be here to work with you. We're here to support Tim's team, and we'll be here to support industry, and we want the project to happen, but we want to minimise the impacts as far as possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marg. So now it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty of the project. But before we invite Tim Poole to the stage, I'd just like to acknowledge the Parramatta Light Rail team, who have done a really amazing job, not only in bringing together this industry briefing, but for all the work they do in engaging stakeholders in the community and industry, and working tirelessly to bring this project together. So well done to the whole team. And of course, leading that team is the Parramatta Light Rail Program Director, Tim Poole, who, as I said, will give us some nitty-gritty of the project right now. Welcome to the stage, Tim.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. I prefer to call it the meat and potatoes. I'd like to start by just reflecting that Parramatta has always been a great meeting place. The meeting of the salt and fresh water in the Parramatta River, just up from where we are today, brought the clans of the Darug people together and was home to the Parramatta people, whose name means the place where the eels lie down. And this source of fresh water, and also the fertile soil that exists around Parramatta, also drew Governor Arthur Phillip to establish Australia's second European settlement around about 8 months after the landing of the first fleet. And it is now a meeting place for many cultures. In fact, almost half of the people that live in Greater Parramatta weren't born here and weren't born in Australia. And so it's quite significant that we, in fact, have another meeting today, and that's a meeting of industry, for me to share with you the way that we're going to bring this great project to market and how we're going to work with you to ensure its success. So a lot of the things I'll talk about will be in the public domain, or is in the public domain, and the EIS documents that were released last week contain lots of relevant information. Hopefully I'll be able to guide you to the bits that are perhaps most important for you to prepare for procurement and delivery. And so today I'll be very much talking about the things that we're really looking for you to start mobilising, and the things that are going to make a difference, we believe, to the success of this project. You got some very strong themes, no doubt, from Tim Reardon and from Stephen Troughton and from Marg, around the importance of working together and the importance of collaboration. And that will also flavour this presentation as well. So the Parramatta Light Rail project has been in operation for nearly 2 years. And in fact, some of you attended our first industry briefing back in March 2016 in Rose Hill. And since then, we've been doing a lot of detailed work with stakeholders and the community, resulting in February this year, the Premier and the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure announcing the preferred route for stage 1. And I hope by now that's a fairly familiar diagram for you. It's 12 kilometres long. That seems to be the standard length for a stage of light rail in Australia. And it is about the same length as the CBD and South East Light Rail, which is under construction, as you all know, in the eastern city. And of course, it's going to link the same sort of things as light rail does really well: hospitals, universities, cultural facilities, and major sporting precincts. So we're not really breaking tradition there, but I think you've already got a flavour that we are very keen to do things differently and to work very closely with already a very strong core of expertise within transport. As this is the third light rail project, and of course we're using all that expertise and all that experience from transport to ensure that we take this to another level. Stage 1 is entirely within the local government area of the City of Parramatta, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of Amanda Chadwick, Greg Dyer and their whole team in working with us to date with the planning of Stage 1. We spent a lot of time with the City of Parramatta team, and as the representatives of the community here, we've learnt a lot from them. I think it's also worth mentioning that next month local government elections will be undertaken for the City of Parramatta, and we'll have a new council in place by the end of the year. Fundamentally, Parramatta Light Rail is about connecting great places. Now, each of these images, while some of them may be artist's impressions, they're actually all real and they're all happening. And it's a really important thing for you to leave with is, and this came very strongly with Marg's presentation, that is things are happening and light rail has to thread itself through not only the existing fabric of the city, but has to interface with urban renewal projects that are underway. And we've been working really closely with both government and other stakeholders to ensure that we get those interfaces right. Westmead, as you're aware, will become a world-class health and knowledge precinct. 36,000 workers by 2036, and with aspirations go beyond that. At the moment, around about 80% of trips to Westmead are made by car. That's not sustainable, and obviously a public transport solution is fundamental. Urban Growth Parramatta North Urban Transformation Program will bring up to 6,000 new residents to North Parramatta. Those of you who took the train here this morning, I hope a lot of you did, you would have already got a sense of things are really happening in Parramatta. The interchange is very busy and there's a lot of construction going on outside its door. The Parramatta Square development's one of Australia's largest urban renewal projects. It's a project that's been led by City of Parramatta in partnership with developers. And that's going to, by 2036, bring almost 30,000 jobs to the CBD. So once again, a really strong sense here that this isn't a pipe dream, this is actually happening. What we need to do in terms of planning for Parramatta Light Rail is ensure that we're able to interface these things directly. And of course, directly connecting these exciting precincts is a fundamental outcome that the light rail will bring. The existing single-track Carlingford line, and I don't know if any of you have ever taken that train trip, will be repurposed to a dual-track light rail system. So what we're doing is using existing transport assets and making them more efficient. And so Carlingford will become regularly connected to the City of Parramatta, and in doing so is better connecting the Talopial Urban Renewal program, which is being delivered by Land and Housing, and Western Sydney University's Rydalmere campus. And for the first time, there'll be 3 university campuses directly connected by light rail. So the customer proposition for light rail, there's been a lot, we've already talked a lot about the importance of construction, but obviously the customer and operations-led process is critical. And we want to make sure that this system actually is transformative in terms of the way, where it connects, the way it activates precincts, and the level of service it gives to customers. So fundamentally, it's a 7-day-a-week service, obviously, from early in the morning to around about 1 in the following morning. Peak periods, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, around about a 7.5-minute service at this stage. That's what we're thinking. An all-day peak with universities and hospitals, I think we all know, they don't necessarily have a defined peak. So moving people throughout the day is really important. And from an operations point of view, very important that operators and vehicle suppliers think about what are the implications of an extended peak and how do we ensure that we run really regular and frequent services for most of the day. Travel times are going to be important, obviously priority through intersections. That's something we're working very closely with RMS and obviously with Marg's team in terms of how do we ensure that we balance out the needs of light rail with the broader transport network. The vehicles that we're proposing 45-metre vehicles, a standard length, and obviously at this stage a standard operating system. Accessible stops, easy connections to other modes. The other modes, obviously, heavy rail, bus, and ferry, and of course, provisioning in the future for Sydney Metro West. And finally, the importance of making sure we have provision for special events around the Western Sydney Stadium and the Rosehill Racecourse. So what I'd like to do is just spend a little bit of time going through the route in a little bit more detail, and try to give you a flavour for the things that both the opportunities and the challenges that we think we face in terms of implementing stage one, but also operating it. And some of these things will feature in the expressions of interest documents and ultimately in the detailed tender documents. So hopefully this will give you a flavour if you go away today. What are the things we're really looking for you to start thinking about so that you can tailor your bids and your responses really specifically. So Westmead, the Westmead Health Precinct, at this stage, our planning, our EIS documents shows a centre running light rail system, and it's creating a front door to the hospital. So this is where the public transport, the walking connections will be, the drop-offs will be, all the car parking will be relocated to the rear of the hospital, but we really want to create a really attractive front door precinct. The connection to the heavy rail station at Westmead is an opportunity for innovation. So we're going to be looking for a really great interchange solution between heavy rail and light rail, considering the importance of easy access, disability access, considering the customers that are likely to use it. So a very important transfer and to get people from one mode to the hospital in very efficiently. So there's something we've got some designs, but we think that's something that the private sector can have a look at to do better. Coordination of construction is going to be very important. The acute services building, which is the main new development at the front door of Westmead, will be largely complete, probably by the time light rail comes through here. We will be coordinating construction with a live new hospital operating environment. So really important to think about how that's going to be managed. Parramatta North. Now Parramatta North is quite a diverse area, and it extends from the Cumberland Health Precinct down into the edge of Each Street. This will become the future growth part of the city. As the city grows, it's most likely to move north. And if you have time to walk up through Each Street and up to Church Street today, you'll get a sense of the enormous opportunity and in terms of urban renewal and development. We're proposing a number of stops, obviously one of them to service the new Parramatta North Urban Transformation Project. There'll be one at the corner of Factory and Church Street, which will allow northbound bus services to interchange with light rail. The corridor down Church Street will need to be fairly carefully designed. We have to balance traffic, bus services and light rail in that corridor. And obviously what we're very keen to do is ensure that we create a very attractive street environment at the same time. So quite a lot of a balancing act there, and it's going to be very important that designers understand the trade-offs between space and operational performance. the Parramatta CBD, now there's probably a few things here that are really important, and we've spent a lot of time working with stakeholders, particularly the City of Parramatta, around interfacing. And obviously the most important one is Eat Street, and Eat Street's just up the road here, and grab a coffee afterwards and start to get a flavour of what Eat Street's about. And I'll come back and talk about Eat Street in a minute. But what we're proposing to do with light rail is obviously to serve Eat Street as a transit zone, so pedestrians and light rail with only local access. So it'll go from being a through road to being a transit zone, which will effectively, we believe, make it a very vibrant precinct and enhance the retail opportunities. But we've got to do it obviously carefully, and it's got to be designed really well. So we're working with City of Parramatta on that one, but also the interface with Parramatta Square. And at the moment, we're very hopeful of creating a really great interchange experience between light rail on the edge of Parramatta and the Parramatta interchange. As I said earlier, the Parramatta Square development is underway at the moment. You can see it's a construction site, and that development will continue for the next 5 or 6 years. And it's around about a $2 billion worth of investment and at least 100,000 square metres of commercial. So it's big, and it'll have retail facilities, and from a public transport point of view, this notion of people interchanging from light rail, having experience of going through a public plaza to the heavy rail station, we're very excited about. Also through this section is we're going through Macquarie Street, which Macquarie Street will also have sections of transit only, and we'll also be going through a new schools precinct which is underway at the moment. That'll be largely completed by the time construction starts on light rail. So once again, something to be aware of is how we manage light rail construction through a live schools precinct. When I say that, there's actually going to be a school on both sides of Macquarie Street. These things we're confident can be managed, but they obviously need to be planned well. So Parramatta East, I think the first thing to mention about Parramatta East is the importance of Robin Thomas Reserve, and we've been working once again very closely with the City of Parramatta to ensure we get the balance right, and I believe this is another really good opportunity for innovation from you. Robin Thomas Reserve is on the edge of Harris Street, which is part of the inner ring road for City of Parramatta, for Parramatta. It's also one of the highest value recreational precincts in Parramatta. Parramatta doesn't have that many, and we want to make sure we retain that and enhance it if possible. So we have to balance the needs of the road network, the needs of Parramatta Light Rail in terms of operations, and the retention of Robin Thomas Reserve as a high-value recreation precinct. It's also, by the way, a place of significant heritage. So it's got a bit of everything. To the east of Parramatta, we're proposing, in terms of the crossing of James Roos Drive, those of you who know James Roos Drive, it's a heavy arterial road for Western Sydney, heavily congested. We're going to make it easy by grade separating light rail. So we're going to be going over the top and landing into Camellia and into the Carlingford line. So Camellia and Rose Hill, now that's once again, it's not without its challenges, but its opportunities are there through the master planning. So Department of Planning and Environment are finalising a master plan for Camellia at the moment. We've got our depot, our maintenance and stabling and maintenance facility at the edge of Rose Hill Racecourse as shown there. But Camellia at the moment has problems with flooding and contamination. So we've dealt with those in terms of our concept design, but we'll be looking to you to have another look at that. We're proposing at the moment to use existing rail corridors, not only for the Carlingford repurposing, but also the Sandown freight line as shown in grey there. That's something that we'll definitely be using in terms of the light rail corridor. The light rail stop will serve both the Camellia Town Centre and the Rosehill Racecourse. So at this stage, we think we've got a pretty good location for both. And finally, the Carlingford line. The Carlingford precinct is a lifestyle precinct. It's got various forms of housing, and obviously the idea is light rail to support the growth of housing choice in GPOP. We're also very excited with the opportunity of using the heavy rail corridor for active transport. So an active transport corridor that connects Carlingford to Parramatta. So the repurposing of the heavy rail line will obviously allow a two-way light rail system. And we're also proposing to close the heavy rail line between Rosehill and Clyde, with that corridor being considered as a future transport corridor. We haven't obviously at this stage decided what that will be, but at this stage it will remain a transport corridor. The stop at Rydalmere will, as I said, will service the Western Sydney University, and we're also very excited about the opportunities to help unlock the new Tilapia Urban Transformation project, which is about a $2 billion government investment. The most important thing about Tilapia, it's a social and affordable housing initiative, and having a quality public transport system connecting that area with jobs in the CBD is a fantastic outcome. And finally, in terms of what else is at the heart of Parramatta, it's obviously my team. And here's a picture of the opening of the office, which was in December 2016. The guy next to me there is, you've already heard from him, and he's a fantastic supporter of the project and a fantastic advocate for Parramatta. We'd like to have him as a project team member, but I'm not sure if that's possible. About 160 staff, and we're based in George Street, which is a couple of blocks from here. The move here has allowed us to really effectively engage the community, really understand the community. And I think together with what Marg was saying is we want to bring all this expertise and all this knowledge and for it to be utilised through the partnership, partnering arrangements, which I'll talk about in a minute. And of course, we'd expect partners to also make a very strong investment in terms of people and also understanding how the local community is going to work. I just want to talk a little bit about the overall milestones of the project. A lot of these milestones were set back in early 2016, and we stand today. We'd actually planned to have an industry briefing today, in August, and it was following an EIS. So pleasingly, we've been able to hit all our milestones, and I guess my commitment to you is when we make a promise in terms of a deadline, we will meet it. It's really important, I know, for you to have confidence around time frames. So in terms of where we go from now, the EIS is a key document. It's out in the community now, and it will close for public display in October. That should allow us to have planning approvals by the second quarter of next year, and obviously the approval conditions is something we want to share with bidders. It also allow us to get the second of our contract packages underway, and also allow us to hopefully finalise procurement by the end of next year and have construction of the main work starting in 2019. Fundamental to this is the ability for us to have our agreements with our key partners in place, and we've already done around about 12 months' work in terms of working with key stakeholders, and we've got third-party agreements well and truly progressed. We want to give you confidence that requirements from third parties is well understood, and we've got the ability to meet those requirements. So now I'd just like to spend a bit of time talking about the delivery model. I'm sure this will be of key interest to everyone and hopefully give you a bit of a perspective around how we've reached this point. I would say it's based on lots of industry engagement assessment within government and a what we call a fully assured process. So I guess it's fair to say that we know light rail projects aren't easy, and we know that contracting models need to facilitate and promote delivery rather than get in its way. So we've been we've gone to lots of different extents to ensure that we've got this right, including 3 rounds of industry engagement, as I know there's a lot of people in this room who've been part of those conversations. And this is in your brochure. So the stage 1 delivery model will consist of 4 packages. An early works package, which we advertised EOIs last Friday, the enabling works package, and then 2 main works contracts comprising an infrastructure package and a supply, operate and maintain package. And I'll call that SOM for short, because I'll be referring to it quite a bit. So this delivery model's been really developed on the basis that we want clear accountabilities, we want appropriate allocation and sharing of risk, and we want to make sure that the scope is aligned to discipline competence, and we want to make sure that scope is aligned to what you do best. So we've spent a lot of time understanding your capabilities and your needs, and we hope this delivery model allows the packaging of scope to match skill sets that are available. So the first one is the early works package. As I said, expressions of interest were advertised last Friday. It's largely a remediation contract, and it's to remediate the stabling and maintenance facility at Rose Hill to allow that to be handed over to the main contract in a suitable condition. So I guess all the nasties and all the challenges around remediation, we're effectively doing that, and we're going to hopefully pass a site that's suitable for construction to the successful contractors, and we think that's one of the ways we can make life easier. We're expecting that work to be completed well before the site is needed for construction of the stabling and maintenance facility. So enabling works, you heard from Marg about how important road capacity improvements were for the CBD. Well, we're also really keen to do this, but to do it early. Now, that picture there is where you can see light rail. So light rail occupies some pretty important road space, but it's not in what we call the inner ring road. The inner ring road is O'Connell Street, and what we're going to do is actually to strengthen and improve the capacity of O'Connell Street in particular, to ensure that we can balance out the traffic requirements of Greater Parramatta, not just during construction but during operations. And by doing that work early, it will make diversion of traffic easier around the key construction sites, and we hope it'll make it easier to be able to sequence work areas and staging areas. So hopefully opening larger areas than perhaps what was able to be done in CBD and South East. So there's some great opportunities here. The other thing we're going to do is to make George Street, which at the moment is one way, into a 2-way street, because we're effectively reducing Macquarie Street to a smaller capacity. So that at the moment is the scope of the enabling works. It's 8 to 12 months worth of work, we believe, and it's largely a standard sort of roadworks type contract, most likely at this stage to be design and construct, but that'll be obviously confirmed in the next few months. So main works, as I said, we want to focus on what you do best, and the sort of principles we've used to come up with the 2 main works contracts are really based on these sort of things. Flexibility to manage external change efficiently and transparency. We all know there will be change. There will be things that weren't planned. There will most likely be changes in stakeholder requirements. As you know, we've got a number of urban renewal projects that will be underway. That things may change there. So we want to be able to deal with those things effectively and not to delay construction while we think about how that's going to be sorted out. We really want the SOM contractor to provide scope and technical input to inform the infrastructure package. And I'll talk about how we do that. And that'll allow an operator and customer focus not only on the SOM contract but on the infrastructure contract. We also want to make sure we get best of breed in both packages. And so by having an operations-focused package and an infrastructure-focused package, we believe we can get best of breed. And also the flexibility and transparency to deal with any project augmentation. And you heard the Minister's words about stage 2. And so we need a contracting model that allows us to be able to effectively manage future stages, both from a planning point of view and from a commercial point of view. So both these packages, it's our intention to procure these by the end of 2018. Now this is in your brochure, and I'm not going to go into the detail of this one, and it's colour-coded. Hopefully most of you, those colours will work for you. But effectively what it shows is that we're splitting the two contractors around some fairly fundamental principles, and that is we're keeping all the civils together and we're trying to keep all the operations elements together. So from a civil infrastructure point of view, it's up to track level and it's up to stop level effectively. So structures and roads, services relocations, slab and track, civil works and placemaking, active transport. Importantly, design integration is included. So spatially, we want the infrastructure contractor to be the design integrator. The SOM Works package is really driven by, we want whole-of-life performance outcomes. So we want to make sure that any thinking is really around how this thing's going to operate for the next 50 years. And for that reason, it includes the supply of the light rail vehicles, the systems and the operational elements and stock fit-outs, the stabling and maintenance facility, and testing and commissioning, importantly, systems integration and operations and maintenance of stage 1 system and infrastructure. And I'd just mention again, it's our intention that through an interactive tender process, the SOM contractor will have an influence on the minimum requirements for the infrastructure package. The operating term is yet to be finalised, but we've already had a lot of discussions with industry about minimum and optimal periods, and that feedback is being taken into account. This isn't in your brochure, and how important is main works governance? We all know how important it is, not only from a contractual point of view, but from a governance point of view. And this diagram is really just to emphasise that we are seeking to have strong working relationships and collaboration, not only between us and each of the contract packages, but to have collaboration between the contract packages. And we think this can be done in 2 ways or 3 ways. One is through an effective governance structure. Secondly, through an interface deed. And thirdly, through interactive tendering. So interactive tendering will form the basis of this collaborative structure. In the interface deed, yes, we're very aware of concerns about cross liabilities, but this interface deed is really going to focus on design coordination, construction coordination, and system integration. So things that you as an industry are used to doing. Obviously, what we want to do here is to make sure that we have a governance structure that allows you to work very effectively with each other and also with us. There'll also be an independent certifier, and we're at this stage proposing that the independent certifier is responsible for all contracts. So the next probably 18 months in terms of procurement, the flavour I want to give you is it'll be highly interactive. And we're also very mindful of ensuring that we do something about bid costs. There is some information in your brochure about the sort of things we're thinking about in terms of reducing bid costs. And fundamentally, it is going to be about high interaction, but in a focused and directive manner. So we're going to allow you to provide some input into how you want to interact, and we want to give you the options of when you interact rather than us mandating that. We're also very keen to reduce the number of documents that you need to bid on. And what we'll be focusing on the things that are most important, the things that we need to make decisions, procurement decisions on. But those ones in particular, we want a stronger commitment from you that those bid documents will actually form part of the contract. So smaller amount of documents, but more value in those things being actual to underpin the contract. We're also wanting to give you early access to the data room. So we'll be shortly releasing registration of interest to allow people to register their interest and qualifying organisations to be able to get access to more detailed information about designs and about surveys and information that we've collected over the last 12 months. So the timeframes are shown there. The early works and the enabling works packages are largely independent of the main works contracts, and we'll be procuring those as early as we can, and obviously want to start construction as early as we can. We certainly will be commencing construction in some form next year. Probably the main message I want to leave you in terms of the two main works contracts is that there will be a single expression of interest for the main works contracts. And subject to strict probity rules, including team separation requirements and management of confidential information, we will be allowing entities to respond to one or both packages. And following the shortlisting of both packages, we will then stagger the RFP process between the infrastructure and the SOM. And the idea is that the SOM will lead the infrastructure so that we allow the operations to provide continual feedback into the development of the infrastructure bids, although both will interface each other. And this process will allow the SOM bidders to have up to 3 rounds of input into the scope of the infrastructure package works. In this way, we want to ensure we get an operations and customer-led outcome for the entire project. So I want to leave enough time for questions, so I'm just going to speed up a bit here and just leave you with a flavour of what we think are the key focus areas. These are things that I believe we have to get right, and they're really important. And some of them you would be aware of. Some of you have got experience with these things. But these are things I want you to take away and talk to your teams about the importance of early planning. So utilities is the old chestnut with light rail. What we've done here is done a lot more work a lot earlier than previous projects. We know that while the utilities challenge here isn't as significant as CBD and South East, it's still going to be onerous. We've done boundary-to-boundary field surveys along the corridor already. We've got an established utility team, and we've developed a utilities clash database as a single point of truth. We have a GIS-based utilities model and supporting survey data as well as a GIS viewer that links to the utilities database. And so the package that we'll be putting into the data room and for delivery will include a clash database. It'll include treatment options for the high-risk assets. It'll include designs for any non-contestable works, and it will have a basis of design manuals showing agreed parameters for asset treatments and utility provider processes. So we're trying to do a lot of the hard work with utilities, and we're expecting to have all agreements with utilities signed prior to going to market. So heritage will be a challenge in two ways. One is what we don't know about and's under the ground. We've already done quite a lot of investigations along the corridor, but also the way it's designed. So that we are going through some sensitive heritage precincts. So in terms of the design of the infrastructure, we want to make sure that it's done in a sensitive way and it recognises the heritage values of Parramatta. So we all know that heritage is important. In this case, as I said, this is the second oldest settlement in Australia with a very rich Indigenous heritage. It will no doubt play a very strong part in determining how and when we do things. Construction management, I think Marg's probably said enough about construction management, how important it is. From my perspective, it's the first half of light rail. So the first half of light rail projects are invariably problematic. We're trying to find ways to make the first half as easy as possible. And so it's really important to think about how you can innovate in terms of staging and how important it is for you to be flexible in terms of your construction work areas. If there's a problem in one area, can you switch focus to another area? These are going to be really important things to think about. Lots of experience from Marg's team that will be available, and hopefully in the interactive tender process we'll be able to share some of those learnings. Third-party agreements, we've got over 40 third-party agreements being drafted at the moment. Around about 20 of them are with utilities, and the other 20 are with some of our, if you like, our partners, so government agencies, City of Parramatta. We will endeavour to provide certainty through each third-party agreement as to what are our transport obligations, but also what obligations we're going to ask you to take on board. So wire-free, we want obviously want a light rail system that's reliable and sustainable. We are very interested in exploring a wire-free proposal as part of stage one. And so what we're likely to do at the moment is specify minimum sections of the alignment that we are requiring to be wire-free. And I think we may have some more conversations with the industry about that. In fact, I think to date there's been lots of feedback from vehicle suppliers on this matter, and we thank you for that work. So innovation, I've talked a little bit about innovation. Innovation's critical here, and the contracting structure is really designed to try to promote innovation in specific areas. So in areas of design, I've mentioned a few opportunities already. In terms of construction, in terms of the way you can bring your expertise in terms of managing staging, but also in terms of customer, in terms of what the operators can bring in terms of customer information systems and the way they deal with customer service. And as Steve mentioned, local participation. We're very keen to see how you can maximise local participation both during construction and long term. So Eat Street, I mentioned earlier, Eat Street. Go for a walk along Eat Street. It's really probably the iconic part of Parramatta in terms of retail and entertainment, and it must survive construction to enjoy the benefits. If we get marked on anything on this project, it will be how well Eat Street's managed. So I'd encourage you to think about how you're going to work in a very narrow corridor. So Eat Street and Macquarie Streets are both very narrow. How that's going to work, how do we keep businesses surviving and thriving? We will have a business activation process which will be led by Marg's team, but we really do need you to play your part. So partnering requirements, and I'll finish on this note, and I thank you for your patience. So I hope you've got a really strong sense that this project is going to be all about partnering, and it's certainly in line with a philosophy that both Tim and Stephen very strongly lead on. We really want to find the best of breed, and we want to be able to partner effectively with you. So I want everyone involved in light rail to be successful, not just some. And that obviously includes us. And includes local jobs. And so some of the things we really think are fundamental to effective partnering are going to be things like the quality of people and the team that you bring. And we'll be looking very early about your ability to be able to guarantee a good team and good people and continuity. So we really want to see the people that are going to deliver and operate the project sometime during the bid process. And we'll be putting forward our project team members on the same basis. We want integration and partnering. We want to see capability of working in a complex urban environment. And we want to see the ability for you to innovate and to resolve issues, because we want to do that in collaboration rather than adversarially. And in doing so, my commitment to you is that we will deliver on our promises, and we will provide the necessary expertise and experience that we've gained through working with Transport for New South Wales in the other 2 light rail projects, but also with Mark's team. So I guess, you know, as we stand here today, we're effectively launching the procurement process for stage 1. I really look forward to working with all of you. I really look forward to seeing the level of interest in this room transform, obviously, into responses in the market. And I think that will underpin this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of building stage 1 to shape what we see as Sydney's second city. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And before you run away, Tim, I'm actually going to invite you to sit down on one of those comfy chairs over there, and I'll invite Marg and Stephen and Tim Ridden back to the stage. Thank you. So it's time for questions, and I hope you've got a few questions for us. We've got a couple of microphones coming down the aisle. So I'll just ask, as you know, we are recording today's event, and that recording will be made available on the Parramatta Light Rail website following the event. So please share that with your colleagues who couldn't be here today. When you do ask a question, if you could please just start with your name and the company that you're representing today, that would be great. Thank you. So who's going to start with the first question? Thank you. So just up the front here.
Stephen Harmer from Lendlease Engineering. Tim, I was wondering if you could articulate further the interactive process between the SOM and the infrastructure partner in terms of the functional specification, how those 3 sessions will work, how it will be tied off, and then subsequently the approvals process and the timely delivery for that.
I was expecting a Dorothy Dix from you, Steve.
I'm glad it was that, Tim.
Yeah. I think what you're suggesting, I think you're picking up, obviously there's going to be some complexities in the way that we deal with this interactive process. We do have a lot of detail on the process. I probably won't go into that now, but I think the fundamental principle here, Steve, is that we want to get, so we'll have a performance requirements document that will be developed, if you like, jointly. So it will obviously be led initially by the SOM contractor. So, for example, we will have a number of stages where we'll ask the SOM bidders to provide comments on our SPR, and those comments can then be fed to the infrastructure bidders. And we'll do that on a staged process. So a maximum of 3. And obviously we'll only be dealing with material departments. We're not going to be dealing with rats and mice. So we've actually looked at this process. We've tested this with a couple of other projects in Australia on how it can work. I'd expect to give more detail on that in the data room. And we will probably describe that in more detail as part of the EOI documents.
Great, thanks, Steve. Question at the front here.
Hi, I'm Rajesh Bharadwaj, and I'm the founder of a design studio called 99aha. And my question was for all of you guys, but in particular yourself, Marg, in terms of, we mentioned the local participation and the business activation process. Now, I've been based in the UK for quite a while, and I've come back, and the most recent project we did was a landmark project, which was all about construction in the London boroughs of Hackney, Tower Hamlets, and Islington. And it involved major aspects of doing this sustainable transport behavior change. We've got over 1,000 plus businesses vibrantly into that. We're doing urban freight management, etc. So I'm bringing that expertise with me, but I'm very interested in terms of these areas of local participation, business activation. Great. How do we engage with you? How do we find out more about that process? How can we share ideas with you guys? Because I've already got a case study and a template which it would be great to share and so on.
That's excellent. There's two phases. Obviously, there's innovation and that sort of activation in end state design and how we can get, public art and stuff incorporated into the stops and all of that sort of phase. Where we've developed a program is really for during construction to try to make the construction area look good as far as possible, to look at shopping guides and other innovations, just to keep the footfall coming, to send that message that, businesses are open, and even be really conscious in front of residents' houses about look and feel. But it's really about promoting footfall to keep coming, even though it's a construction zone. So there'll be opportunities as we move forward, particularly in the Eat Street area, that we'll be looking for assistance to help us.
Just had a couple of comments. So Marg's got an extensive sort of background. So she worked on the Sydney Olympics. On this type of thing, we also took a lot of pointers from the London Olympics as well, and have just got that more fine-tuned and fine-grained as we go. But it is like having an Olympic coordination group within transport on an ongoing basis. So with that level of urgency, that level of granularity is what Marg's bringing to the table here. And you should just interact with her team in the Sydney Coordination Office about your experiences, always looking for new ways to do things. I know those parts of the world in London that you've just spoken about, so we'd be happy to share experiences, and so get in contact with Marg.
Yeah, and our changes are not just construction. When we do travel demand, we want that change forever. So we're using this process to try to drive changes that Sydney needs. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that question. I've got another question at the front just here. Maybe pass the mic. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Aileen McAdam from Bechtel. You talked a little bit about how managing the technical interface between the systems and the civils. Can you, any comments on how commercially how that will be managed and the allocation of risk and accountability? Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously one of the things we want to do is to use an interactive process to actually test some of the commercial principles, and particularly around risk allocation. I think our thoughts at the moment are that perhaps the SOM contract can be a bit more fixed, even though we're looking at a more of a performance-based operations contract. So we're going to look at rewarding performance in terms of operating outcomes. In the same way we want to do that with infrastructure. The infrastructure, what we do know about light rail is obviously, as I said, the first half of construction tends to be problematic. And the way we're going to structure the infrastructure contract is to have elements of known scope and that'll be subject to more a fixed pricing structure. So things that we know the industry does well, and we know that they're comfortable to take the risk on. But things that are not known or more variable will be subject to different pricing mechanisms. They may be a risk share arrangement. They may be a provisional sum arrangement. So at this stage, we're looking at around about three different categories of pricing. Now that also may apply to certain amounts of SOM. The important thing here is that while we still want the contractors to have skin in the game, we want the commercial arrangements need to support the principles of collaboration, innovation and flexibility. And so they will be reflected in the pricing.
Just probably add a little bit. we've had to think about sort of the KPIs and pain gain as well, and one of the big drivers for us will be about that sort of integration relationship, and so you know, that will be rewarded financially as we go through. So we ensure that, you know, the typical alliance style approach to that relationship and the fact that how we manage that, there'll be financial incentives to do so.
Great, thank you. Thanks for your question. Any other questions? Yeah, we're just in the middle of the room there. Thanks.
Thank you. Fred Diarchi from Stadler Rail Australia. My question is more around the rolling stock. Is this project discrete and standalone? In other words, it's going to require its own simulators, its own driver training, management style and all of that? Or are we competing against other projects where there's going to be certain synergies that other players will be able to bring to the market? And the big question, how many?
We've already done a fair bit of work around what we call interoperability. So how does Parramatta Light Rail relate to Sydney Light Rail? How does it relate to Newcastle in terms of standardisation of operating systems? The Asset Standards Authority are developing light rail standards at the moment, and we're likely to be the first project that refers to some of those. Generally speaking, we're planning this as obviously being a discrete system, so that you know, so it operates. It has its own operating standards, but as far as possible, we want them to be compatible and consistent with what's happening elsewhere. So on that basis, we are obviously going to put this project to market on the basis that that there should be no significant advantage to someone that might be already operating a system in New South Wales or Australia, or developing or having any technologies. We're certainly wanting to use technology that's proven and systems that are proven, and probably our performance requirements will be based on precedent projects such as Sydney, Canberra and Gold Coast. We don't want there to be any surprises there, but generally speaking, we think there's enough opportunity for new players to come in for this project and not necessarily be disadvantaged by incumbents.
I'll add a bit to that. I mean, the light rail sort of, particularly vehicle systems market, is evolving rapidly. Vehicles are changing, you know, low floors, wider vehicles, bigger vehicles, more capacity, lighter. You know, we've got different systems coming in, supercap, capacitors, batteries, and this is changing very quickly. And so when we look back to the Inner West Light Rail, which was our first light rail, and we've gone through now to Newcastle where we're cap free, you know, there's big changes in that. And for us, it's about, you know, we want great vehicles, great systems. We want, you know, driving that forward. We don't want to buy old technology. You know, we're looking for wire-free, as Tim's already said. You know, this is about getting a great product and a great outcome for Parramatta.
Great, thank you. And I think we have a question on this side of the room.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Karen Bishop from Cathy Jones and Associates, KJA. We're a specialist communications consultancy. Having done some work on Sydney Light Rail with Mark's team, you certainly didn't underestimate the importance and the challenges involved in the communications and the community relations, especially during construction periods. My question was, are you looking, similar with the arrangement with Alltrack, to have some communications capability built into those contracts?
Yeah. There has to be an element within the actual contractor, and there has to be that responsibility. But at the end of the day, it is shared. Okay, so it'll be shared between Tim's team, my team, and the contractor themselves. But obviously government will wear reputation risk, and we're very aware of that. But it's so important that the day-to-day changes you make, that the contractor who's delivering this project has a frontline team who can engage and guide the community through the changes.
Yeah, so that's probably applies to a number of things that we've talked about today. I just assure everyone that we will be clear when we go to market what the matrix of responsibilities are. So we're not going to necessarily be wasting time on should we do this or should you do that. I think we've got enough experience to know what government or transport's good at, and what we will be taking responsibility for, what we really want you to take responsibility for, and there may be some areas in between where they're the things that we deal with through an interactive process. But I certainly, we're very aware that we don't want to leave it open, and so definition around exactly what we do will be one of the key pieces of information we provide.
I'll probably add to this one as well. In terms of Marg's role, Marg mentioned when she was on the stage earlier that she also has a Transport Management Centre. Transport Management Centre deals with, across the Sydney network, about 600 incidents in a 24-hour period. A lot of those are critical incidents that you might see on the media, etc. A lot of them are just low level. She also deals with, quite literally, I think about 35 to 40,000 road occupancy licences per year. 35 to 40,000, all the ones that you guys are out there dealing with on your projects right at the moment. So their volume is immense, and it's every day. Parramatta Light Rail will be a really, really important project, but it's one of many. And the ones out in Sydney right at the moment that are really successful in terms of projects are the ones that get the partnering right and get the media, get the comms, get the marketing, get the stakeholder management right. They're the ones that are moving really, really successfully and well. We want Parramatta Light Rail to be exactly like that from day dot. So your partnering arrangement in this area, you can't overemphasise enough. Marg will not stand in the shoes of you in terms of doing your job about being a good community participant in coming into Parramatta, building light rail for a few years and going. You leave a legacy, and we all have a role to play in that. So I can't overemphasise that enough. We are in communities across Sydney and in Newcastle, for that matter, right now, where we're entrusted to go in there and do a really good job. But how we work with the stakeholders, how we work with the community day in, day out, we all have a really, really strong role in that, and you should take that message fairly heavily from us across the board in terms of how we'll go out and how we'll procure that within the contract itself, but also what Marg's role will be and how they'll interface.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one last question, just down the front here. Thank you. Okay, so we've got two questions. So we'll start here and then we'll go to that side. Oh, there we go. We'll start there and then we'll come to you. Thank you.
Jonathan Williams from Minter Ellison. Question for anybody on the panel about the SOM package. Minister Constance and I think some of the other presenters also sort of affirmed the state's clear intent to proceed at an appropriate time with stage 2. What is the team's thinking about how stage 2 might be anticipated in the SOM package, either in terms of a process or role for the SOM contractor in stage 2, or I suppose balancing that with considerations about term?
So I think you've very concisely summarised what we're thinking about at the moment, actually. The Minister did mention that he's hoping that there'll be a determination on stage 2 by the end of the year. And that will probably give us better certainty as to the timing. I mean, timing of future stages is fairly fundamental, as you'd appreciate. And I think what we're looking at the moment is ensuring there's enough flexibility in the way that we let that contract to facilitate augmentation. Whether or not we ideally obviously want some sort of pricing requirement in that, but that I think will largely depend on our ability to get certainty as to the timing of this future stage. So we're looking at 2 or 3 different ways of dealing with that, but obviously in anticipation that there may be a stage within the operating term of stage 1, then we do want to ensure that we've got that sorted. So that will certainly be, there'll be further definition, and we will certainly answer that question more directly in the EOI package.
Thanks, Tim. And then we just had the question at the front here.
Thank you. Phil Pearce from SMEC. One of the things that always concerns me at any new railway build is we see the images as you have behind you with Mr. and Mrs. Beautiful and the matching Dalmatians in coffee shops, etc. But the thing we never see is the railway depots, which I think are pretty ugly. What's the intention, given that the depot will be built on the end of the Camellia development area, to actually build over the site? Perhaps a high rise. It's a pretty good site there overlooking Camellia, and I'm sure there could be some money drawn back out of that development.
Look, there's been a number. We've had a number of conversations already with developers about the feasibility of that. There's probably a couple of things at the moment to comment on. Firstly, is for stage one, we've tried to keep things simple in terms of not trying to complicate land deals with the core infrastructure that needs to be delivered and operated. And that's once again because we know there's enough complexity here, and we know that actually usually future stages start to deliver those sort of more integrated outcomes. So we really want to get this stage up and running and operating successfully. The second thing is, at this stage, we obviously want to ensure that the environmental requirements of the facility are properly dealt with before we can actually make an assessment of whether it's suitable for residential. The third thing is, at the moment, the Camellia Master Plan isn't contemplating development south of Grand Avenue. Now, that may change. Ideally, we'd like to provision a depot design that may allow the future development, and that's something, once again, I think in terms of, and that's one of the reasons we're keen for the SOM to have responsibility for developing and designing the depot is maybe making more efficient use of land to allow the future opportunity for some development. So there's a number of moving parts that aren't necessarily bedded down yet, and so, as I said, we're not, from my perspective, we're not going to throw something into the market to say we're not sure what we want. Give us your thoughts. We'll want to be very clear about what we think the future opportunities for that land is.
You could be looking at future proofing during the development.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Now, the other thing, obviously, at this stage anyway, the location of the depot has also been selected to ensure it's big enough for future stages to stable future stage systems.
Great, thank you. So, look, obviously we've reached our time today, and I thank you all for your questions. This is the beginning of a conversation. So I do encourage you to keep connected to us. Hopefully you heard about this event through our industry newsletter that you can sign up to through our stakeholder relations email address. And look, just reflecting on what we've talked about today, we are looking to industry to be innovative and to work with us collaboratively, keeping the customer at the centre of everything we do. I think we'll all be heading to Eat Street after this, Tim, after that great draw card that it is in Parramatta. And I thank you all for being on our panel today. And we look forward to having this conversation with you again. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
Well done, it was really good.